Hello, everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. How is everyone doing this morning? Welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to the Good Morning Asgard podcast, where today we're going to talk about The Flash. As last night on the Welcome to Asgard podcast, we had gotten word just before the stream started. Again, shout out to Steven for letting me know that Deadline had released an article about the projections for the upcoming release of The Flash, and oh boy, it's not looking good. It is not looking good at all. In fact, I have the numbers. I have the comparison between all of the DCEU movies, and interestingly enough, remembering that Black Adam came out in 2022, and that inflation has been going on since then, interestingly enough, you're actually looking at a Flash movie that could potentially come in even underneath the domestic opening weekend for Black Adam when you actually use the adjusted numbers. So let's just say right now, if the numbers hold, and that's of course a caveat, the numbers actually have to hold as they are for any of this to really remain relevant. But if the numbers hold, this film is set to be a massive flop. And there's really no other way of saying it, especially since we know the $200 million budget that they have been purporting, that they have been trying to sell. I know that I don't believe, and I know many people who are looking at this movie and even just knowing some of the basic facts, some of the basic history of the development of this movie don't believe. And ultimately that leaves the question, one, not only will this film be a flop, and based on the numbers that we're seeing right now, the chances are very, very high. But then in addition to that, just how much of a flop is this film going to be? So we'll dive into that and just have a general box office discussion as well. Before going further, though, please make sure you smash that like button, lap that fire button, honestly, and smash the rumble button as well, as it does mean a lot. And this is episode 46 of the Good Morning Asgard podcast. So thank y'all for joining me this morning. We have Matt R. in the chat. What's going on, Matt R.? Thank you very much for being here. GMonkey76 is hanging out. How's it going? Miss Martin Muses, what's going on? Welcome back. JC McDonald in the chat, good morning to you. Thanatos Felicitas, my man, says, long time no see, where you been? I missed you, man. I missed you too, Thanatos. I feel like it's been less than 12 hours since I last saw you, and those are way too many hours in between. We also got Great Wuda in the chat, what's going on? Miss Martin Muses, thank you very much for the super sticker, for the rose. Appreciate that very much. Blessed feast also of Saint Basil the Great. Thank you very much. We also got Luke Zilla in the chat and E. Stevens in the chat. How is it going? How is it going? All right, we'll go ahead then and dive into this main story. So again, we talked about this a little bit last night, but I've had some time to look at the numbers, to compare it to the other DCEU movies, and also to look at the release dates. Because honestly, that is going to be a major factor, right? Some might say, well, $155 million, but is it opening in all major markets at around the same time? Well, I've looked at the data and I can confirm, yeah, the $155 million opening. Remember, this is coming in underneath the opening weekend globally of the Little Mermaid movie, the Little Mermaid live action movie, right? So it's coming in underneath the global opening for that film, and we know how much of a flop that movie is based on the numbers that we're seeing. But we also know that when it came to The Little Mermaid, it did not open in all markets at the same time. It opened in the vast majority of them, which is why we were still able to make projections, as it's not doing much of anything in Japan, but that was still a major market that it had not yet released in. What we can say about The Flash, though, is that it is expected to open in all major markets around the same time. We actually go over to the numbers. As you can see, they've already got their chart ready for when the information starts to come in. And notice those dates, right? Australia, Brazil, China, right? We're talking June 15th, 16th. So within the next few days. France, Germany, Italy, Japan, all again around the 15th, 16th. And then the only late date on here is Russia, which is listed as June 22nd. Interestingly enough, to have Russia listed on the release date here, at least over on the numbers. But I've also confirmed this by going to IMDb as well. And again, notice all of the June 14th here: Belgium, Denmark, Finland, France, Indonesia, Iceland, Italy, South Korea, Mexico, Norway, Sweden, Singapore, Taiwan. So again, couple of major countries in there in the international market. And then you have the UAB, Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Germany, Hong Kong, Hungary, India, Kuwait, Kazakhstan, the Netherlands, Slovakia, Ukraine, Ukraine and the 15th. And then you have several others coming out on the 16th, including United Kingdom and Spain, Japan as well. United States too. Interestingly enough, on this list, I am not seeing Russia listed. So I'm wondering if they have decided to not release this film. It's interesting how Hollywood will take a stand, will take a moral stand when it comes to Russia, and yet they'll still continue to release their films in movies like China, of which this film is getting a release in. It actually makes no sense whatsoever. You can't, on the one hand, say, yeah, we're not going to release our films there because we don't want to support Russian businesses or whatever it is that they're going to try and say, while at the same time giving 75% of the entire box office from China to the Chinese Communist Party, which has done much more egregious things. I mean, we're talking here about, two bad guys, but they're both bad guys. And I honestly believe when you especially look at the human rights violations done by China, they are significantly worse. And yet you don't hear Disney or you don't hear Warner Brothers, you don't hear any of these major studios or even mainstream media talking about the business dealings that many of these countries have with modern-day Hollywood. It's almost as if there's hypocrisy, a little hypocrisy going on there. But here's the thing. The movie has no excuse. So the movie is getting released in every single major country over the next few days on this weekend. So there's not going to be we'll just wait until this film comes out in that country. It's all or nothing for this opening weekend. And so for this to have a projected $155 million global, only a $70 million domestic, that is not good. And we have the numbers. So I mentioned this last night, gone through this chart over on the numbers, right? This has all of the budgets, all of the domestic opening weekends, and, et cetera. And so here is the interesting thing. All right. So at $70 million opening weekend, unadjusted, that puts it right around the opening for Black Adam. Black Adam made $67 million in its domestic opening, made a total of around $168 million domestic, 223 international, so a total worldwide box office of 391. So just based on these early estimates, and obviously a lot of things can change, a lot of things can be impacted. Word of mouth can obviously have an impact on this film, but the word of mouth, I will say, from the people that have gone to see it, has really not been that good. There's been images now also leaking online about some of the cameos in the film, cameos that are completely CGI, that are cringeworthy and possibly offensive. So I'm thinking to myself, look, I'm not going to deny that there are people that are genuinely excited to go see this movie, right? That is a fact. There are people who will go to see this film on day one, who will be excited, and many people who will probably even like the film, especially because of that Michael Keaton factor. I've heard great things about his part of the movie. Basically, I hear it's a movie in two parts. There's the Ezra Miller Flash movie, which is terrible, and then there's the Michael Keaton Batman movie, which is fun. At least that's kind of the early indication. Just don't forget, though, the writer of this movie, Christina Dobson. Let me go ahead and see if I can confirm that real quick. Not that it matters all that much, but hey, we like to be as accurate as we can over here. Yeah, Christina Hodson. Just as a reminder, Christina Hodson is the same woman who wrote the screenplay for Bumblebee. You all know Bumblebee's story was not very good. Even if you like the movie, you have to at least admit that much. And then she also wrote Birds of Prey. And we all know how much of a train wreck that movie was. So she has essentially no credits to her name. And when she was announced as having the Flash, she really had almost no credits at all. I honestly don't remember if Bumblebee had even come out yet before she got chosen for that role, or if it was after Birds of Prey. In either case, she had nothing going for her except for a really poorly written film in Bumblebee. And again, I know there's some people that like it, but the story is trash. And then Birds of Prey, which most people will at least openly admit and honestly admit that film also is pretty trash. Other than that, in 2016, she wrote a film called Shut In. So as you can see, this was the pedigree that they had to go on. It's amazing to me, and obviously I know that James Gunn running the DCEU has just recently come about and he's planning to relaunch it, but you would think that by the time he came in, he probably would be wanting to change some things, or he probably would be wanting to fix some things. But ultimately, it seems to me that the best decision, based on the numbers that we're seeing, would be for this film to never be released. If you're already going to be having a tax write-off, as you are with most of your big budget films, why release it when all that this film seems to be likely to do is further damage your brand? I think that's something that would be an interesting assessment, because I don't know if there's a way of really quantifying it. That, is it better for you to release your movie, not have it be as much of a financial loss, so less of a tax write-off, or to not release it at all and maybe be able to actually, save the brand itself? Because not only do you have the whole Ezra Miller factor going on with this movie, being the lead, with all the controversy surrounding him and the allegations against him, etc., continuing to push more and more people away. So even if James Gunn was able to revamp things, even if he was able to get things going, he's going to have to rebuild not just the actual film universe, but he's going to have to actually rebuild fan trust as well. And he's not universally well received when it comes to the DC universe, because I'm sorry, but The Suicide Squad was not good. Some people may have liked it, but it was not very good. He's done great things with Guardians, but other than the first movie, which is phenomenal, the second and third films are okay. I've seen it. There's some good things in there. There's some things I don't like, but okay, I don't need to see it again. When it comes to The Suicide Squad, I saw it and thought to myself, oh, wow, that's time I can't get back. Again, it wasn't the worst movie or one of the worst movies ever made, but it was definitely not good. So I'm looking at this right now and thinking to myself, why is it that they put all of their eggs years ago into this unknown, untested writer to put in charge of the writing process for this huge film? What was meant to be the huge film was meant to be the one of the tentpole films, one of the staples of the DCEU, and then obviously when you brought in James Gunn, trying to actually have it be the revamping of the entire DCEU. But the damage that's going to be done to the brand, if these numbers hold, is going to be abysmal. Again, 155 million opening weekend worldwide, only 70 million domestic, is abysmal. We'll go ahead and pull up this chart right here, because we love charts here over at OMB Reviews. And this is a chart I had forgotten I had made already, actually, when the early numbers from Box Office Pro had come out. But here are the adjusted numbers, just to have a comparison. So first off, we got budgets. All right. So I have the budget for The Flash listed at 220. Most people have it listed at 200. There is one source that does have 220 listed as its budget. I think because the official line is 200 million, 220 is fair, I think. Because it's probably a lot more than that. If we are to believe what has been said about reshoots, we know the film has been delayed, so we know that at the very least marketing cost is going to be a little bit higher, because they're having to market the film a little bit longer. But 220 million, let's just be fair. Right? Let's just say, okay, 220 million, that sounds about right. Here's the fascinating thing about that. Right? One, this ends up being, again, not one of the more expensive of their releases. Man of Steel cost close to $300 million in today's dollars. Batman v Superman cost well over $300 million in today's dollars. But not only do you have these budgets where this is definitely on the higher end, not close to the low end, you also have to look at these ticket sales, all right? So what I've done is I've taken the box office, I've adjusted it for inflation. This is the domestic opening weekend, all right? And I also have a category here that goes through the actual estimates for ticket sales. So it takes the average ticket price from the given year that the film released, all right? And let me go ahead, actually, just to make this a little bit easier on myself. Let's go ahead and see if can I lock this column. Where is the lock button? There it is, the freeze button. Freeze one column. There it is. Beautiful. Oh, look at that. That's gorgeous. So now we can know what we're talking about. So Man of Steel's opening weekend domestically adjusted in today's dollars was $153 million. Again, as a reference, the estimates going into this weekend are that The Flash is only going to make $70 million. So that's half of what Man of Steel did, and this is the film that got everything started when it comes to the DCEU. They built that up to 212 with Batman v Superman, which was a train wreck. I know there's a lot of Zack Snyder fans out there, but the movie's not good. And if you're going to say, well, you got to watch the unrated edition, doesn't change anything. It really doesn't. As far as the actual feel, it might add some plot elements and it might clear up some confusions, but it's still a Zack Snyder film and it still has the Zack Snyder tone and it still has the Martha. Why did you say that name? And the terrible Lex Luthor casting. Suicide Squad then dropped to 171. Wonder Woman dropped to 129. Justice League, you can see kind of a trend here, right? This downward trajectory. $82 million for Aquaman, which ended up being a massive success with over $1 billion worldwide. But again, domestically, you can see there's a pretty clear drop-off, right? Dropping to $64 million for Shazam! Birds of Prey. This was impacted by the pandemic with $38 million. So natural progression all the way down to $19 million. Then you had The Suicide Squad. Theaters are starting to reopen, but there's still some, factors there that I will say, okay, I'll let you have the pandemic excuse for this movie because it was still impacted by it. And I think this also was an HBO Max, at the time HBO Max, now it's just Max, day and date release. Then you get Black Adam. Black Adam is really the first film to be released by Warner Brothers in the DCEU that was during a time when the vast majority of theaters were open. And that had a 75. So again, this number came back in 2022. The rate of inflation, again, I'm using the calculator from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. So this is an official government site. Some people might say, hey, maybe the percentage is actually a lot lower, or rather it's a lot higher. Maybe they're underestimating it because it's an official site. Either way, it's coming from an official source in this way. So if you take the dollar and the value of the dollar just last year alone, you actually get $1.12 this year. Establishing itself. I really, really hope that it did not start a new stream. I really, really hope it did not start a new stream because that would be really bad. All right, so it looks like we are back. There we go. Heartbreak Ridge, thank you very much for confirming that we are still live. Sorry about that. I have no idea why the internet went out. There is a recording of this, though, so if you're listening to the podcast version, then you won't have an issue. So let me go ahead and just put this in the chat. So we back. I don't know what happened to the internet there. Apologies. But going back to what I was saying, so if you actually look at the $75 million adjusted from Black Adam, and The Flash is expected to make somewhere between 70 and 75, those are abysmal numbers there, especially when you remember that the average ticket price last year is not as high as it was this year. So based on that alone, looking at the actual ticket sales, this movie is expected to sell less tickets opening weekend than Shazam in 2019. Just keep that in mind for a second, right? Even if you don't want to admit to inflation, even if you think the whole inflation conversation is ridiculous, you can't ignore what the average ticket price would have been back in 2019, which was around $9.16. And then what that would be in today's dollars, where today's ticket price is around $13 per ticket. So, oh boy, this is awful. This is abysmal. Again, when your opening weekend is coming in as one of the lowest opening weekends for a DCEU movie that was not impacted by the pandemic. Because if you just take out for a second Birds of Prey, Wonder Woman, and The Suicide Squad and just say, okay, those movies, those have some exceptions there because theaters being closed, etc. You then jump straight to only two other movies. Only two films in the DCEU have actually come out since the time of the pandemic, right? Since Shazam 2019, which was the last full release film for them. And those two movies, Shazam 2 and Black Adam sold 6 million tickets, around 6.4 million tickets. And then Shazam 2 obviously had a massive failure at the box office, right? 2.3 million tickets opening weekend. So when you look at these numbers here, right, even if you ignore the domestic opening adjusted, the fact still remains that this is going to be one of the lowest box office weekends, one of the lowest ticket sale weekends domestically for them in the entire history of the DCEU. Again, if you take the COVID ones out of it, if you take the pandemic films, the ones impacted by the pandemic out of it, you have the second worst opening, projected second worst opening, with the worst opening going to Shazam 2. Yeah, that would be the second worst opening. So the second worst opening in DCEU history not counting the pandemic films, which I think is fair. This is abysmal. Again, this is atrocious. So even though dollars-wise, hey, it looks like it might actually beat that of the first Shazam film, Shazam 1 still sold more tickets because tickets cost a lot less. So again, you can throw inflation out if you want. Ticket sales, though, you really can't. And so ultimately, what does this mean? I think this means that The Flash is in a lot of trouble financially. And the film hasn't even had a full release yet. Now, if the opening weekend comes out and it ends up making $100 million domestically, it would have to do a lot to get there based on the estimates that we're seeing. But hey, anything can happen, right? Let's say it has a $200 million global opening. Even then, that's still not great, right? Even then, you're still losing to films like Little Mermaid's global opening weekend, which we know we know Little Mermaid is a flop. We know it's a box office flop at this point. And there's other films too that are box office flops that it will end up losing to in its initial opening. And again, so that's an extra $45 million. If it even makes that much more, it's still not good. So basically, they have a chance of doing poorly or doing really poorly. And right now, the projections are indicating it's going to do really, really poorly. All right, let's jump back into the chat. What say you? Amazing Baking Soda, what's going on? Welcome back. Matt R. says, good morning, my good sir. Good morning to you. Yes, indeed, Miss Modern Muses. We love our saints. Absolutely. St. Basil, believe, is a doctor of the church. Has some really great writings. I'll have to look into those today. Mr. Roy, what is going on? Hail to you. Ryan Doles, how's it going? Sorry, I haven't been in the chat for a bit. Recently got a job to pay for college books. Hey, I understand. Got to pay for the college books. Your average Patriot nerd says, good morning, chat. Good morning. Oh, good morning to you, your average Patriot nerd. Thank you for being here. We got the K-Man. Good morning to all. Hope you are well. Hope you're doing well also. Your average Patriot nerd then says, Birds of Prey was absolutely awful. It really was. The fact that there was an entire subplot revolving an egg and cheese sandwich, I wish I was kidding. Black, what's going on? Welcome back. Ryan Doles tagged to say, I saw the leaked picture of the cameo, and man, is it rough. I personally don't have a connection to that character, but I feel for people who do. Yeah, same here. I've gone on record to say I was not a big fan of the original. I was not a huge fan of it. I have an issue with the story, especially when it comes to the reversing of time. And again, that's more of a filmmaking critique because of the way it's shot. It's just not very effective. And in the way that they're showing certain events happen as they unfold. And then also, too, I did not think that Lex Luthor's character made any sense as far as how he was able to figure things out. The plot tried to tell people, oh, he figured it out because he's really, really smart. But it's like, no. If Lex Luthor, we know that he is smart from the comics, from the source material, he would be showing still how he figures out the things that he figures out. In the movie, I'd only seen it one time, but in the movie, I just remember he just happens to figure it out without any explanation whatsoever. So anyway, I don't have a lot of connections with that character either, but it is bad, right? The image that is being leaked is awful, and I hate when they are doing that. And I think that the only times I've seen it been done tastefully, the only one that comes to memory where it's done tastefully and effective is probably in the Ghostbusters Afterlife movie, right? Where they bring back, it was Harold Ramis, like they bring him back. And I was like, look, I would rather you not do that. I would rather you not use the image of someone who has passed on in that way. But at least it seemed to have been done, pretty respectfully for what it was. Almost every other time it's been used, whether it's Tarkin in Rogue One or any of these others, it's just never done well. And so, yeah, what we're seeing right now from The Flash, it's really bad. It's almost as if it was put in last minute, and it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. Black, time to say, Secret Invasion is based on the Manchurian Candidate with Denzel Washington and Anthony Mackie. You will need to watch Captain Marvel to understand it better. So is Secret Invasion out? Did that already come out? I have no care for anything Marvel anymore. It just, as far as caring about the story, and unfortunately, I did already see Captain Marvel. So yeah, I understand. I've already heard explanations about what the Secret Invasion is, obviously with the Skrulls and everything like that, and that's obviously established in Captain Marvel, but Again, does it when you have to start off saying, "Oh, you need to watch Captain Marvel as a prerequisite before you see this show," that's not a good way to start. That is not a good way to start. The R, what's going on? Says, "Hello, I'm working for the man, but listening in." Well, thank you for listening in, man. Hope that you're doing okay. Black says, "The box office is so busy now, all with blockbuster movies. Can any movie make $1 billion in 2023? Yes. I honestly believe that when you get to Mission Impossible, Dead Reckoning Part 1, I think that film has a good chance. I think that film has a very good chance of getting to $1 billion. And here's the other thing too, right? Because I think that's what a lot of, so-called box office experts have been trying to talk about, saying, "Oh, well, it's just all this competition." Keep in mind, films for a long time, in the midst of competition, were still able to make $1 billion. So to use that as an excuse today is more of just trying to make an excuse as to why a film and why a studio are not doing well, right? Remember, $1 billion is not the end-all be-all. $1 billion is not the pinnacle of success. It is something that sometimes, in the case of, for instance, a film like Fast and Furious 10, that's a break-even point. That's really bad. If your break-even point is $1 billion or close to $1 billion, that's rough. Because, again, $1 billion is not guaranteed in general. But I counteract and counter anyone who talks about $1 billion is so hard to get to these days, because, no, it's not. As long as you make a good movie, if you make a good movie that is a part of a big IP and is able to get a lot of people excited about it and talking about it and giving positive word of mouth, you can do it. Look at what happened with the Super Mario Brothers movie. Look what happened with Top Gun Maverick. Look what happened with even going back to the pandemic era, where even a film like Spider-Man No Way Home was still able to make $1 billion when a lot of theaters, especially internationally, were still closed. Why was that film and why were the other films that I've just mentioned? Because in most of those cases, they were really good, well made, and every single one of them had good word of mouth, positive talk, positive conversation. Those are the qualities of things that you need. Brian Barth, welcome back. Been a while. Taddy say, "Looks like James Cameron is going to waste the rest of his career on Avatar. Avatar 3, 2025, Avatar 4, 2029, and Avatar 5, 2031. Yes, and I'm hoping that it doesn't get to 2031. I really hope, and obviously we're far from this, and a lot of people still need to wake up to it, but I really hope Avatar 3 fails. I really want it to fail. And people might say, that doesn't seem very nice. Well, I'm sorry, the Avatar universe is not well established. It's not good. Just because it has pretty visuals doesn't make the story any better. And the story is very trash. So I would rather Avatar 3 lose money and then Disney say, all right, yeah, we're giving up on it. Now, obviously, I know it's not going to be that simple because many of these films are being shot around the same time and a lot of the money has already been given. However, I would be very much rather preferring that it doesn't get to Avatar 5, personally. But Black, please do not spam. There's no reason to spam. I fall behind in the chat. As long as you tag and you say it one time, I will get to it. I won't get to it right away, but I will get to it. But please do not spam. Brian Barth says, they need to make movies cheaper and actually make movie stars. Well, I'll agree only with the first part, all right? Because you can't really make a movie star. You know, they've tried, especially in today's world, right? They've tried to make people famous. They've tried to make people it. I mean, look what Disney tried to do that with The Little Mermaid, right? They tried to make it seem like Halle Bailey was bigger than what she was. And it's been mostly rejected by a lot of people. And you can look at a plethora of other examples. So making stars is not the thing. What they need to do is they need to make movies cheaper. I agree with that assessment. But they also need to make better movies. Instead of, in the case of The Flash, hiring Christina Hodson, who had no movies under her belt, except for a few bad ones, hire somebody that can actually write the material. Hire someone that actually knows the source material. Hire two people, one person, especially if you're making comic movies. Hire one person who is a comic writer or who's someone that at least is a expert in the comic lore and the comic history, and then have someone else who actually has experience writing screenplays. Because then you might actually have a good story. You might actually have a good adaptation of something. But you're not going to get that if you're hiring someone who has no movie experience. And again, Marvel's been doing that. See, Marvel, DC and Disney, right? Disney and Warner Brothers are so alike because they're making the same exact mistakes in almost every single way. They're both overspending, spending way too much on their movies. They're also hiring people with no experience to direct or write or both. And what ultimately happens? The films come out, they're not good, and nowadays, because more people are a lot more careful with their money, they start to actually lose a lot more money. Hundreds of millions of dollars, in fact, between the two studios in just the last year or two. So, anyway, Dan Blackroy tagged to say, I'd be very surprised if the production budget wasn't north of $300 million for Flash, none spent on the VFX. Well, here's the thing, Dan Blackroy. They may have spent the money on VFX, but you can spend a lot of money on something, but still also spend it on something that's not good, right? So I think a lot of that money, and I think it could be well north of $220 million, is likely because of how much it costs to not only create those visual effects, but to render those visual effects out. It takes a lot of computing power to do that. And that doesn't necessarily mean, though, that the money's being well spent. So, yeah, I think that it definitely spent a lot of money, a lot more money than what's being reported. However, I would actually say a lot of it probably was spent on the VFX. All right. So, again, the biggest issue for me is going to be if it actually ends the stream and starts a new one, because that's something where I have a very little control over it. So I'm really hoping that doesn't actually happen yet. Internet hiccups are so annoying, and I usually don't have them. It's of a problem. So I don't know what is going on with that. I'll have to look at that a little later on, as it looks like it's dropping again. Oh my goodness, this is so freaking annoying. The worst thing, the worst thing about the internet in general, whenever it's going out, is that I have no control. There's nothing that I can really do to bring it back, right? There's only so much that I can do. And because basically I need to go to my actual router and I need to actually like reset it, which is something that you can't really do during a stream. All right, so it hasn't dropped recently, so I'm gonna go ahead and put that we're back. Hopefully it is coming through. You might need to refresh it, but yeah, thank you, JKD Buck. I appreciate it. Yeah, it happens, but it doesn't often happen to me because I have, I try to make sure that I have the best internet possible. And so anyway, getting back to it. Yeah, law of diminishing returns there, Bryant Barth. Let's see. Black tag to say, Mel Gibson said that Israel runs Hollywood. Oh boy. Black, I don't know what your deal is, man, but you're kind of going off on tangents, man. Don't make me have to just ignore you. Your average Patriot nerd. Zack Snyder tone was good for The Watchmen and would be good for a Batfleck movie, but it doesn't translate well to a Justice League or Superman movie. I would disagree. I don't think it worked well for The Watchmen. I think that if you go back and rewatch that film now, it does not hold up very well. Brian Barth had to say, Zack Snyder is style, no substance. Though I do like Watchmen and Batman v Superman Ultimate Cut is a guilty pleasure. Yeah, I mean, that's what happens, right? Some people in their movies enjoy watching something with style rather than having anything of substance. I can totally understand why anyone would think that. But you still can't take away the fact that the substance isn't really there. Dan Crane, what is going on? Welcome. Appreciate you being here. Nick Braun, what's going on? Welcome back. Yes, they can't. And that's why, luckily, you're not really hearing a whole lot of talk about that for the movies that are now coming out. They've mostly moved on from it, but it is kind of insane to think about how back in December of 2021, they were still making it as an excuse, right? Remember, West Side Story had just come out, and West Side Story was looking to flop. It was not doing well at the box office, and of course, the big thing everyone was mentioning was, oh, pandemic. And then within a week, you had Spider-Man No Way Home crushing records and being able to make well over $1 billion easily. So, yeah, it's amazing how long they held on to that excuse. Dan Crane, as a member, says, have you watched Flaming Hot the movie? Excellent true story of the origin of the Flaming Hot Cheetos. I did not. I've seen the trailer for it. The trailer honestly looks like a parody. So I don't have a lot of interest in it, personally. Brian Barr says, did you hear that Scorsese is planning to make another Jesus Christ movie? I did not. I do have some concerns because it's the modern day Hollywood era, and I know that Scorsese doesn't really fall he doesn't really fall into many of the modern day Hollywood traps, but I also know that he needs to redeem himself in my mind. The last movie that he made was not good. The one with De Niro and Pesci, The Irishman, it was not good. The CGI especially was atrocious. So he needs to do better. I really hope that his upcoming film is able to redeem himself. General Wingster, Daddy say, what do you mean? Tarkin totally looks like a real boy. Of course he does. Oh, man. So, Black, Mission Impossible has lost all its premiere screens to Oppenheimer. That does not mean anything. And to say, are you saying that Mission Impossible is not going to have any premium format screens? Because I can tell you right now, that ain't true. There's no way Mission Impossible is not going to have at least a few, and by a few, I don't just mean 3, I mean across the country, premium format screens. Oppenheimer is going to have specialty releases because there are going to be, I think, 50 theaters that are going to actually have a 70 millimeter print of the film. So many of the premium format screens are actually going to be just more specialty items for it. And here's the other thing, too. Premium format screens do not equate to billion-dollar film success. What equates to billion-dollar film success is a good movie with good word of mouth. If anyone's going to be able to bring a lot of people out opening weekend, it's going to be a Tom Cruise Mission Impossible movie. Those films have been improving. And again, I'll do a full breakdown of it when it eventually comes out and compare it to the other films in the franchise. But it's a franchise that has been on the up and up. Now, Cruise is not a guaranteed $1 billion. I think Top Gun Maverick actually may have been the first $1 billion film that he ever was in. So it's not a guarantee. But there's also no denying that many people like him as an actor. Many people like him as an action star. Many people enjoy the things that he's able to do. And so that is definitely going to be a factor. I think it's going to have a much bigger impact on opening weekend versus long-term. Long-term, that's word of mouth. So yeah, not having premium screens, it doesn't really mean a whole lot. JKD76, word of mouth is key. I usually don't watch a movie unless you, Gary, my wife, or my kid say that it's good. Yeah, word of mouth is absolutely key, for sure. Because even if I don't like a film, if the vast majority of people or fans in general don't like a movie, and this is the reason why Rotten Tomatoes is trash, but more and more people, I think, are going to start to realize that they need to rely on the all-around audience score if they're going to use it. I would say not to use it, but if they're going to, they can't trust the critics. If they are going to trust the critics, they need to probably go top critics. But even then, it's not perfect. And then for audience score, you can't trust the verified score, the quote-unquote verified score, but it is what it is. Michael A., what's going on? Miss Minnesota Hockey fan, how about a hockey player? I was just so sad last night. Again, happy for Vegas. Congratulations to Vegas for winning the Stanley Cup. But I was so sad because I didn't want it to end that way. I don't like how they just ran. They're clearly the better team, but running roughshod over the other team, I don't know. I like competition. I like when things are exciting, but when there was basically nothing exciting going on the entire game because it was just a blowout and they won the series 4-1, I don't know. I kind of wish that it was a little bit more exciting personally, but congratulations to the Vegas Knights. Brightburn85, I feel like Ezra Miller derailed his own Flash movie. Robert Meyer Burnett has said that not everybody knows about Ezra's scandals, but at the same time, the internet never forgets. Yes, this is true. And that's the reason why we can't go into the movie expecting everyone to know the things that are happening with him, right? So I think that Robert Meyer Burnett is absolutely right on that point. But it's also true that a lot of people do know because it's happened so many times and so many of the things that he has done have had high-profile effects that a lot more people know about that than most other people. Like, for instance, more people, I would argue, know about Ezra Miller and the allegations against him versus Jonathan Majors. I think that more people would know about Ezra Miller than about Jonathan Majors. Now, whether it has an impact on the box office, again, I think that Robert Meyer Burnett is definitely onto something. Because the fact that the film is set right now to be a flop, and again, if you're just coming in or if you missed it because of the connection issues, the film, The Flash, is being projected to have a $70 to $75 million opening domestic, $155 million international. The domestic total alone would make it the second worst opening in the entire history of the DCEU, not counting the pandemic films. And again, I don't like giving that caveat, but when you have films that are not being released at the same number of theaters, some of them having day-and-date release on HBO Max, that does have an impact, right? That does affect the overall numbers. So the fact that the only film that is expected to have done worse than The Flash, based on the early estimates, would be Shazam 2, and that this film would actually have less tickets sold than Black Adam and even the first Shazam movie, that just goes to show you, right, where the current state of this franchise is, where currently Warner Brothers is, where DCEU is at this point. And so that's why, yeah, the Ezra scandals might not have an impact, but I think the IP, I think the DCEU IP, when you actually look at the numbers and you see how it started off pretty strong and then grew to its zenith in Batman v Superman, but then fell off a cliff after that with every subsequent release, they were having issues long before the Ezra Miller stuff. So basically what I'm saying is all the Ezra Miller stuff does is make more people not interested in supporting your movie. So you're already at a low bar, now make that even lower. Think Noodles, what's going on? Welcome back. Core member 123, what's going on, Core? I believe you are the same Core member on Twitter. Hail to you. Thanks for being in the chat this morning. Phoebe Waller-Bridge over troubled water, trying to make a star. Yep. I think that's a great example. Yeah, they're trying to make her to a star, not buying into it. She's awful. No, she's not good, right? She's not good at all. She's not the worst actress ever. Again, some people might go out of their way to try and say that. I'm sorry, like that's just not based in reality. But she's also not great. She is quite boring. Yes, the internet was being a boomer earlier. And again, thank y'all for sticking with me if you are still watching. Again, I do apologize for those technical issues. And hopefully it is not a major issue overall. 50 people still watching. Whoo boy. Thank y'all for being here. Yeah, Heartbreak Ridge, yes. Gary must have been running my internet provider this morning. It must have been. Yeah, seriously. The apocalypse starts with the internet going down. See, that's what's going to happen. Like, one day I'm going to be streaming, and the internet's going to go down, and I'm going to think it's a hiccup, and then all of a sudden it's just never going to come back. And then that's when I start hearing like all the random alarms going off. And I'm like, oh boy, it's happening. Spotty connection on Lookout Mountain. I'm not on the mountain itself. But we have EPB. And EPB's actually been pretty good. Again, I typically don't have these types of connection issues. It could very well be that I have not updated or restarted my router in a long time. It could be my Wi-Fi card. There's a lot of things it could be. When I move into the new office, there is a hardline connection, which I'm excited about. Because sometimes it can just be random Wi-Fi issues. But the Wi-Fi is still very strong. It's like 300 megs up and down. And it's able to get even higher than that. But yeah, if the connection's spotty, it doesn't matter how fast the connection is. Think Noodles actually, I just joined. I don't know if you talked about it already. But what are your thoughts on all the Disney movie delays? Marvel, Star Wars, and Avatar. Disney is bleeding. People are losing interest. Yes, they are bleeding, and they are in a bad state. Again, when you have a film like Little Mermaid, expected to lose $100+ million, when you have Elemental coming out this weekend, which is projected to have only a $30 million opening weekend, which means the prospects of that film making money are essentially none. Every single major IP that Disney has is losing money at this point. You have the MCU show that I think just came out. No one's talking about it, to no one's surprise. So every single thing that they have. And also, I don't buy for a second the whole, yeah, we're going to have 3 Star Wars movies out by, 2026? Or 2027 or something like that? Yeah, I don't buy that. I don't buy that for a second. I don't think that they're going to have any Star Wars films in that amount of time. And if they do, can't wait to cover those box office numbers, because Lord knows they're going to well overspend on that, especially if their first one's going to be a Rey movie. Oh yeah, let's see, the character that you did a terrible job developing now is going to be on her own without any of the original characters to prop her up. Yeah, good luck with that. Good luck with that. Oh, goodness. Sebastian, will Guardians 3 be profitable? It already is. I know that not everyone uses the same metrics that I do, but I've talked about this actually on the box office breakdowns over the weekend. that it is already profitable. According to my charting, in fact, it's, I believe, close to $100 million in net profit. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick. Yeah. So again, if you look at my charting here, the film had a 625 break even. That's again 2.5 times the reported budget. Some people have it at 3 times the budget. I use 2.5. However, the film at 805, and it's made more than this. This was last updated this past weekend, but it already is actually past 3 times the budget. I think right now it's at 3.2 times its budget. So the film is absolutely doing very, very well. So again, according to my metrics, it's about $100 plus million in net gain profits, and it's still making money. There's a chance of it hitting $850 million worldwide, in fact. And in fact, because we do like to do things live here on the channel, let's go ahead and look at the numbers. First off, yeah, Little Mermaid's already in 3rd place. And also, here's what I was saying before about the weekend, right? There were some who had projected Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse would be beating Transformers. Transformers still won the weekend, but look at these drops. So Spider-Verse is already back in 1st place. So that's not a good sign right now for the Rise of the Beast at all. But look at Guardians. Guardians has been out for 39 days. It's been out for almost 40 days. It's available on various platforms, I believe, at this point. And it's still making almost $1 million a weekend. Right now, it's at $807 million. So I would not be surprised if by the end of this weekend, it's at 815, 820. And again, you have a chance of the film getting to 850, but the film's already made its money. It's already made money. Sebastian tagged to say, what movie do you think will surpass Super Mario Brothers box office? The only film coming out this year that I think has any chance of actually being able to do that is going to have to probably be the Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Now, I don't think that it's guaranteed to make $1 billion even, but if any film has a chance, it's going to be that. And it's based on Mission Impossible has become a pretty massive franchise. It has a universal appeal to it. Last night, it was reported, someone in the chat reported that it is getting a release in China, which, as you all know, I'm always very, very critical of. They don't need that money, but if they do release there, something tells me the film's probably going to do pretty well in that country. I could see $100 million coming from China for that movie. So that could very well be enough. For instance, Indiana Jones, that's not going to do it. That film is going to be a massive flop, right? That there's just no way. Trying to see any other ones that are coming out. Let's see. Barbie from Warner Brothers. I think Barbie might make them money. I don't think it's going to make $1 billion. And the reason why is because, yeah, Barbie might be an international IP. However, if you've seen any of the conversations about the writing process for Barbie, I don't know if y'all have seen this. It's using, according to at least the Wikipedia article, so take it with a grain of salt, but it makes sense and it totally something I would believe in. Greta Gerwig, who is cringe for so many reasons, is the director of the movie. Her and Noah Baumbach, who has done mostly independent films his entire career, is co-writing it. And they are using a psychology book, or rather a book about the psychology of teenage girls and self-image, apparently in the writing. So it's based off of the actual Mattel, I think it was Mattel, character and character art, character design, but they're also using a resource about self-image of teenage girls. So I have some doubts about whether or not the film is going to be able to actually, capture the attention of everybody. And so that's why I don't think Barbie's going to be able to do it. Oppenheimer, hey, look, I love Nolan. I think Nolan's great. But Oppenheimer, the trailer for it comes across as a movie that it's going to bring a lot of people out, but I don't think it's going to bring enough out to make $1 billion. And so, yeah, everything else coming out this year, I just don't see it. I don't see the possibility of $1 billion really for any of the next releases. I'm looking at all the major releases set to come out over the next year, and none of them are really standing out. Because even Dune Part 2, I'm excited for Dune, but Part 1 didn't do all that well. And again, I would say pandemic can be used in the explanation for that one, but it's also just not a massive IP. Not a lot of people are into Dune. I just mean in the way that it's not a universally loved franchise, right? It's not something that a lot of people necessarily know about. Obviously, I like the first Dune film in the new remakes of it. I don't like the original Dune film, but the book is fantastic. The original book is phenomenal. I love it. But yeah, there's really nothing else there. Star Goose over on Rumble. What's going on? What is going on? So go back to the chat. Brian Barr says, Scorsese is coming out with Killers of the Flower Moon. Yeah, and I know the trailer for that one but the trailer, honestly, from what I saw from it, came with a lot of vibes of, okay, another movie about, basically, it seems like it's going to be about land being taken and stuff like that. I don't know. I'm kind of tired of those stories. Jakety Buck, Odin, would it be too much for you to say, Gordon's alive? No, it would not. It's never enough. Brian Barr says, I recently saw On the Waterfront, so good. He goes on to say, a powerful, great film. Got me thinking, how can this 70-year-old film still keep me intrigued when all modern films fail to do so? Well, yeah, not all modern films. There's still some really good modern films that come out. Again, Top Gun Maverick, I think, is a great example of that. From this past year, John Wick Chapter 4 was great. Nefarious was great. And there's others too. So, but I definitely agree. On the Waterfront, it's a classic. It's phenomenal. Dan Blackroy, Christopher Nolan will detonate an atomic bomb before every screening to bring in the customer for a thrilling live theater experience. You can't buy that kind of showmanship and word of mouth. Yeah, and that's why it's going to do well. It's definitely going to do well. I think it's going to be a lot better than what Tenet did. Tenet obviously was heavily impacted by the pandemic box office, but anyway, JKD-Buck76 says, I won't be watching The Flash. Ezra Miller is a garbage human and probably a PDF file. I see what you did there. Sad because I love Keaton as Batman. Yeah, and again, I think there's a lot of people who will be saying, yeah, I don't want to go see it because of Ezra Miller being in it. We're talking about it on Friday Night Tights this weekend, so I will fortunately be watching it. And I was already, again, take Ezra Miller out of the equation. I already would not be wanting to go see it because, again, the writer, Christina Hodson, wrote Birds of Prey and Bumblebee. And that was the only experience that she had going into this movie. Miss Midozaga fan, I like Batman since Miller is in the movie. I will pass. Exactly. I think a lot of people are going to feel that way. Not a majority. Majority of people already have already tapped out of this entire franchise. Have already said, yeah, if it's got a DC in it, I don't want to see it. Because DC has not been able to deliver almost at any point. Jakety Buck, Phoebe Waller-Bridge is the Garth Brooks of Hollywood. Not really talented, just manufactured. Yeah, I said it. Boom. Dang. Ambrose Chamberpot, my computer was running super slow with the Windows update. Oh, yeah. Those window updates will mess you up. The R, what's going on? Sebastian, have you listened to the Joe Rogan episode with Chad Stahelski? With Chad Stahelski. Very interesting conversation. I've not. I think someone had mentioned that in either a chat or in a comment, and I'll have to check that out because he's a good director. Brightburn, I don't think people about the comic book history of Flashpoint either. Don't know about the Flashpoint history. Because if they did, they'd know that DC Comics is hitting the reset button. We don't even know if Marvel will ever hit it. Yeah. I honestly am looking at everything going on with the DCEU, and it's just not looking very good. Mason Blackney says, "Hail Odin, happy Sacred Heart Month." Yeah, absolutely. JKD Buck, they're gonna find out the hard way when they make a Rey Palpatine movie. I hope it flops like Ishtar and Leonard Part 6. Nice. Jenna Wingster tagged to say, "Oh, this usually works." Tony Stark, performance issues very common in young men. 1 out of 5. How dare you? Let's see. Charles, what's going on? Akawagu says, do you see any of the James Gunn DC movies hitting $1 billion? No, at this point, I do not. Again, right now, the DC franchise is in a terrible state. It is in a terrible state. I just saw someone come in. Hold on, McRib Prime. Let's see. 155 is pretty darn good, but I won't be spending a penny. It's not good, actually. McRib Prime, 155 million is not good. I don't know if you were here earlier, but we broke down the overall numbers. Keep in mind, 155 million globally is less than what you had The Little Mermaid make. So are you someone that says The Little Mermaid's a flop? And if you are someone who says The Little Mermaid's a flop, you cannot at the same time then say an opening global weekend that's less than The Little Mermaid's global opening is good. It just doesn't work that way. I got news for you. No, 155 is not. It's abysmal. You have to compare it to films that have been coming out more recently that are global, worldwide releases, costing around the same amount of money. This movie is set to come in at a very low number. Look at the domestic total too, $70 million projected. If it only makes $70 million, and again, it's an if at this point, if the film does better than these projections, we might have another conversation. At this point, there's not a lot of reason for me to think that it will do better. But again, could be wrong there. But at $70 million, guess what? At $70 million, it's coming in underneath Black Adam's opening. Black Adam made $67 million last year. Because of inflation, that makes it up to 75. And if you say, I don't care about inflation or inflation is stupid, guess what? Let's look at ticket sales. 6.4 million tickets were sold for Black Adam, estimated. The Flash, if it only makes $70 million, you're looking at 5.3 million tickets being sold. That's even less than the first Shazam movie. 155 is not good. So it's like saying, stop trying to make fetch a thing. Stop trying to make this a good global opening. This is not a good global opening, all right? This is not a guarantee of massive financial failure, but this is also not a good global opening in and of itself. Brightburn, it's silence, and I think it is a fantastic movie. Very, very good. Rome is Falling, welcome to the chat. Eamon Holland, welcome to the chat as well. Getting close to the end here. Average Patriot Nerd had to say, I'm also really looking forward to Dune Part 2. The book is great. The 80s Dune is a bit of a guilty pleasure for me. Yeah, again, I understand people enjoy it. I don't want to take away anyone's enjoyment of that movie. I don't like it. I really just don't like it. So, let's see. Miss Minnezaga fan, who is a member, says, I want to see Oppenheimer and or rather, welcome to the Rumble channel. Star Goose, what's up? Again, if you have a comment or question, put @Odin at the very beginning of your comment, @Odin. Let me know you're trying to get my attention. I can read those out loud. Unless I'm saying hello. Undead Nerd, what's up? McRib says, yeah, I thought that was domestic. Saw the wrong article. Yeah, McRib. So if it was making $155 million domestically, oh yeah, that's great. That would be a great opening weekend. Because then you would probably be seeing a $300 million global opening. But a 155 global, no, that's not good. Bruce is having buffering issues. I'm sorry. I don't know. I don't see it happening on my end, but sorry. JKD-Buck76, Dune Part 1 was made with $165 million. Yeah. And Dune Part 1 looks phenomenal. And that goes to show you, right? It's not the amount of money that you spend on visual effects. It's what you spend it on. And it's how you spend it. And what we've seen consistently from Warner Brothers and from Disney, Warner Brothers especially in their DC properties, Disney especially in their live action remakes, and pretty much everything actually from Disney, is that they spend so much money and they waste it. They spend it on bad effects. They spend it on things that are not well done, that are not well made. So anyway, with all that being said, we are at 11 a.m. I like to do a 1-hour stream for the Good Morning Asgard podcast, as I don't want to go over too much and cut in on any time. Not that I would take anyone away from the Geeks and Gamers daily stream, but I know there are a lot of crossover watchers who also support Geeks and Gamers and also who watch the Geeks and Gamers daily stream. And so I do like to keep it at around an hour long. But again, thank you all very much for being here. Just kind of to recap everything so far that we've been talking about. The Flash, it's only expected to make, and again, these are projections. These can change. They don't have box office pros yet. They might have it on the higher end. We'll have to wait and see. But Deadline is reporting $70 million domestic opening weekend for The Flash. $155 million globally. I've looked at the numbers. This would be abysmal, especially for the domestic box office. This would be the second worst opening weekend in the entire history of the DCEU. The only films that are not counted in that equation, by the way, are films that came out that were directly impacted by day-and-date release numbers. So the film is not expected to do very well. This is also, remember, the film that's supposed to reset everything, the film that's supposed to pave the way for the future, a film that they spent years and years and years making, a film that they could have easily made into a massive franchise hit. And based on the numbers that we're seeing, it tells us clearly general audiences are done with DC, are done with the DCEU. And at this point, I don't know if James Gunn is going to be able to be enough to revitalize the franchise. At this point, yeah, all hope lost for DC Films. At this point, I do think that I think there's a good argument for that, Papina. I think there's a really good argument to say that. Again, it's not all hope completely, because obviously, James Gunn could have a brilliant vision, could make movies that bring everybody back. But the reason why I have some doubts about it is because what's the one DC film that he has made? The Suicide Squad. I'm sorry, that was not a good movie. That movie had a lot of problems, had a lot of issues. I know some people liked it, but in general, it had a lot of problems, and it didn't really do much as far as box office is concerned. Now, again, that one was towards the tail end of the pandemic effect, so we could absolutely talk about how that got impacted by that, by early release on HBO Max and things like that. But the movie itself, looking at as a movie, was not very good. So based on that metric and how, in reality, James Gunn has only really had one great movie, and that was Guardians 1. Guardians 2 and 3 were fine, but they weren't great. Nothing compared to the first movie. So I think he's mostly a one-and-done guy, because you always have to ask the question with a filmmaker, what have you done for me lately? What have you done lately? And there's just not a lot of stuff there. So yeah, I think that DC is in a lot of trouble, especially when it comes to their films. General Wingster, I like Odin over Bald Jeremy anyway. Well, I appreciate that. And yes, that's a good point too. Think Noodles. If Flash is opening to 70 million, what's Blue Beetle going to have? Talk about an obscure character that no one's heard of, or most people haven't heard of. I know I hadn't heard of him. Again, I'm not a comics person, so that makes sense. But think about how many other people who go see movies that are not comics people. The only thing going for it is that the star happens to be one of the stars from Cobra Kai. And that's the only intriguing part of the entire thing at this point. So anyway, Flash is in a lot of trouble with these numbers. And we'll do a full breakdown of this as they actually come in. The actuals are what matter. Projections can be wrong. We saw this especially with Mario. This can absolutely change. But as of right now, danger, 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 Will Robinson. Not looking good. So those of us at this stand, you guys are all amazing. If you're watching this back, please leave a comment down below. Hopefully the video itself is intact. I have no idea what's going to happen. If for any reason it's split it up into different parts or had issues, I am recording this, and so I'll be able to upload the fully non-problematic, delayed ridden stream version of it as well. But before y'all head out, congratulations. I believe Jeremy's plushie has now been fully funded. So that one will go into production. So if you've not bought it yet, though, hey, still support it. Also, I think Ryan's either is almost at it or has passed it already. If not, I know mine is at 81% fulfilled. So hey, if you would like an Odin plushie, Templar Knight Odin plushie, go check out Makeship, and I'll go ahead and post that link over on YouTube and on Rumble, as those are the two platforms that have people in them. So thank y'all in advance for that, and support everybody if you can. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. See you all Friday Night Tights. Talking with Gary later today because I know he's going to North Carolina. There's an event going on there. I don't know the full details of it. Hope to find out more about it today. And so I'll either be doing that stream from home or from North Carolina. We'll have to wait and see. But you guys are great. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my June Patreon Subscribe Star and Locals members at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above. Starting off first with Patreon, Father Luca Illich, Hymir Irie Hymason, Garrett Searles, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Orange Hat Reviews, you can check it over at his YouTube channel, Orange Hat Reviews, Laura, the Modern Major General Story, Rosetta Allen, who you can check out at her YouTube channel of Eagle Rider, and Miss Martin Muses, who you can check out at her YouTube channel by the same name as well. Also to my Subscribe Star peeps, Matt317, check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Fast Reaction, The R, Mr. Roy, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK Man, who you can check out over over at xtheboundaries.co. And lastly, to my every live stream and every video, check out the top link in the video description below. You also can get access to things like a giveaways channel where I give away Blu-rays, 4K steelbooks, all kinds of stuff every single, most weeks in the month. I try to give away something, or at the very least towards the end of the month, I will make it up with several giveaways. Basically, most people are guaranteed to walk away with something at the end of every single month. So if you want access to that, again, check out the top link in the video description below, as well as access to an exclusive podcast. This past month, I was actually able to record a great podcast with Michelle from Force of Light Entertainment. So you want access to that and also a plethora of other content, check out the link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.